People have no confidence in super. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I've got my stein of coffee that I'm still working through, and I thought we'd look at this ABC News article. It's discussing superannuation returns. Now, they're not doing too well, but the super bosses are telling us not to panic, not to panic. Now, super has been in the news recently. A lot of people are taking advantage of the ability to withdraw money out of their super. And we just recently discussed yesterday, the HDO will crack down on people that are taking that money out. The union-controlled super funds are publicly stating, oh, they're stealing money from people who really need it. It's their own money these people are taking, by the way. So I put up after I did that video, I put up a little question on the community tab here on YouTube, asking people, do you have confidence in your super? And out of these 688 votes, 14% said yes, and 86% said no. And many of you left quite interesting comments. I'd rather put my money in crypto. Vigorous, I voted no. What's everyone's concerns? Here's a systematic failure. It's nice to have, but I wouldn't rely on it. I mean, how many people aren't relying on it? How many people will consider it a bonus? And others are going, it's fantastic. If you have a paid off house and $1 million in super, you're doing really well. And here's the thing, what is it? Omnipotent Peace Man. I wasn't expecting a 90% result. Well, we kind of dropped down from 90%. So generally we could say that, well, at least from the viewers of this channel, a lot of you aren't very confident in your superannuation. And one thing that you all have to remember is you've got the last generation, the one that bought all their houses in the 80s dirt cheap and are now worth, 3x or 5x what they paid it for. A lot of them didn't have superannuation. They weren't forced to put a portion of their money in super. They could save that money for that deposit for that house. I think that the biggest advantage you can have entering into retirement is having your own fully paid off house. The differences in people, if you're still renting, and even if you've got 50 or 60 grand in super or 100 grand in super, it's better to have a paid off house and still have that little bit of super cash than not. It makes a big difference, So that's just something to keep in mind when all these older generations are critical of the younger ones. They weren't forced to put a portion of their money in super. And remember everyone, you're forced to. It's your money that is forced to invest in these industries. And sure, there are certainly advantages to it, but I remember I had colleagues at university who were laid off and none of their super had been paid for 6 to 12 months. They didn't realize. And that's why I suggested to some of the younger staff we employed, one of the advantages of having a super fund where you can see the account daily is that you can see to make sure you're getting paid. I wanted them to appreciate. I said, guys, check your super regularly because I'm paying it. That's money I'm paying you bastards that you don't even appreciate. And that annoyed me to no ends. But nonetheless, let's have a look at this article. And I think it'd be interesting, actually, in the comments, if you could all let me know, because there are a mix of people who are in industry super funds, who are doing self-managed super funds, who have got particular super funds that give you more control. And it'd be interesting to do a few videos just looking at different ones and watch what degrees of control you can have. Because one thing I did before, quite some time ago now, we flipped a lot of ours into cash because I was worried about the market. And I had that capability in my fund, but a lot of people don't even realize that they have that much control over it. They just leave it there and ignore it. I think one good thing that could come out of this entire discussion is people take more interest in it and realize it's theirs and learn how to control it and adjust it and take charge of it. Realize it's their money. So anyway, let's have a look. Australia's largest superannuation fund, Australian Super, expects returns to be flat this year. But, and before I go any further, don't take financial advice from an architect. By the way, we're the worst profession to take financial advice from. If anything, do the opposite of what architects do. Trust me. I know a lot of architects who are middle-aged and who I would expect, because they started their career and they started their businesses back when there was still a fee scale. I thought they'd be doing a lot better than they actually were, and it's a bit embarrassing actually with some of the A lot of people showing off having wealth when it's all on debt and strained relationships. So yeah, that's my buyer beware. And anyway, let's have a look at this. Australia's largest superannuation fund, Australian Super, expects returns to be flat this year. A result CEO Ian Silk calls an exceptional effort given the upheaval of the pandemic. At first blush, it's disappointing, but when you consider the incredible gyrations in investment markets over the last 3 or 4 months, it's really an exceptional effort, he told News Breakfast in his first in-depth interview since the height of the pandemic crisis. As the man ultimately in charge of the retirement savings of more than 2 million Australians, watching over an investment pool of 180 billion, Mr. Silk said the last couple of months had been pretty rugged. But now he said the business was back on a quasi-normal footing. Really? Really? I love the mustache. I love the mustache, you know. He's got it going. He just needs a pocket. I'm sure he's got a pocket square there as well. You know, the retro handlebar mustache. Good work, Mr. Silk. And we'll just have to see where the market's going. Seems to be still very volatile, up and down, up and down. This week, Australian Super's balance plan ticked into positive territory at 0.2%. With a couple of weeks left to go in the financial year, Mr. Silk expected it would end somewhere between -1% and 1%. Against the backdrop of a share market losing a third of its value in a month, a job market in crisis and recession, Mr. Silk was keen to remind Australians the run of 10 years of positive returns could not go on forever. Well, that's the thing. We only know. You've got a generation that don't know anything other than positive returns, anything other than growth. They've never experienced a recession. And I'm barely old enough to remember the last one. And I remember it so vividly because business just crashed for my father's construction company. And that's when we moved up to Queensland. Don't hold it against me, everyone. I was born in Victoria. Don't hold it against me, Queenslanders. I'm one of those Mexicans that came up for the beautiful weather. We generally say to members in a 20-year period, you might expect 4 to 5 years of negative returns, he said. We are well and truly overdue in fact, for a couple of negative years or certainly a flat year. This year is providing a real-time lesson in why superannuation should be seen as a long-term proposition. From mid-February to mid-March, the Australian share market plummeted 36%. According to Super Ratings, the median balanced super fund, which is a mixture of shares, infrastructure, property, credit, and cash, fell 8.9% in March. Mr. Silk said a small number of his members panicked and switched their investment to cash. That's what I did. I did it before March. Yet while the stock market has rebounded, people who switched and stayed with cash have seen those losses locked in. Well, not if you did it before. Unfortunately, the amount of money they retire with, and therefore their standard of living, is going to be materially less than if they just stayed the course, he said. So Australians withdraw billions from the fund. And what this tells me is that a lot of people don't have confidence in it. A lot of people don't have enough there to probably materially impact on their retirement, I'd say. You know, how many people don't have a significant amount in there? Maybe enough to buy a car, but not enough to buy a house. Here's the question I would put to you. What would you rather? Have your house paid off in 2 years, 3 years, you know, take all your super and then build up your savings? Or would you rather be dividing your efforts? Think about it. 2 years of lost compounded interest, but then you're completely in a home. That's the most frustrating thing I've encountered to people in my generation who are trying to get in the property market, having all this money sitting there that you just can't access, that you can't use. Maybe that's done by design to avoid another bubble in property. So as job losses were mounting in late March, the federal government announced it would allow Australians who had lost income because of the pandemic to withdraw up to $20,000 of their superannuation to use now. At the time, super funds and unions cautioned against taking money out unless it was absolutely necessary. So far, 2.12 million applications to access super early have been lodged with the ATO, and super funds have paid out $2.2 billion to its 300,000 members. So here's the thing. I mean, it's their money. They consider it their money. They consider it there to manage. They don't want to give it up because it's less fees they can charge. It's less money they can make. Less prestige from having good super funds. You know, less handlebar mustache trims. I'm just jealous. That's all it is. I'm just jealous of his mustache. You know, maybe I gotta try and rock that one. I think Rachel would kill me. She'd kill me. With the scheme opening up again in the new financial year to allow another 10,000 to be withdrawn, Mr. Silk expects the dollar drawdown to be between $3 and $4 billion. But analysts from economic consultancy Alpha Beta show that 40% of all people who had withdrawn super early either had no decrease in income or had received government benefits to cover any losses. Well, they never... See, here's the thing. Did they say that if... They only said you had to have a decrease in revenue. It depends on where you were. It's very ambiguous. It also found 2/3 of withdrawals were spent on discretionary items like clothing, furniture, alcohol, and gambling. Yes, the gambling is actually much lower than people realize. You know, 2/3. A lot of it was spent on clothing and furniture. Clothing isn't a discretionary item. It's a necessity. You need to keep warm and clothed. Furniture can be seen as both. It can be seen as both. Mr. Silk agreed that in some respects the system was being abused. Well, it's people's money. If they want to spend it like that, shouldn't they be allowed to? Shouldn't they be allowed to? Or does this just show people have a lack of confidence in the system? Before the second round of applications for early withdrawals begins in July, he would like to see a change, so loss of income needs to be proven rather than just attested to, as is currently the case. He also warns tough ID checks to prevent more cases of people fraudulently withdrawing under another person's name, as happened to 150 people. But shouldn't the super funds be able to manage that risk? Shouldn't they have the accounts on record of the people that they're dealing with, so that it's linked to an account that's proved to them? No, because it's their money, it's not yours. But he bristled at the idea that superannuation funds were against the scheme because it reduced their investment pool. Well, yeah, that's what I think the truth is here. It's just costing them money. $3 or $4 billion out of 180 billion. It's not a big issue for Australian super, he said. Oh, well, it's, what is it, 2%? Our concern is the impact it has on people's retirement savings. It's not for discretionary income. If we want to do that, let's change the superannuation system together, and I don't think anyone's arguing that. I'm arguing that. I think a lot of people are arguing that. I think, well, remember, superannuation contributions are going to go up to 12%, so that's going to be less of your money that you receive, everyone. That's going to be less of your package will remain the same, but more will be forced to go into super. That's what can happen. That's what can happen. You know, and some people need that money just to live. A change in investments. Just think about it. You know, if you had 10%, people could buy better food. They could take care of themselves healthily. Maybe they'd live longer in their retirement. Maybe this is the real reason why. As the federal government looks to stimulate the economy, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has called on Australia's 2.7 trillion super industry to invest more in building infrastructure. Traditionally, super funds have invested in brownfield or recycled assets rather than take on the risk of new developments. Signalling a change in investment approach, Mr. Silk said he was very happy to answer the Treasurer's call to join nation-building projects. He just needed a pipeline of ideas. Well, here's the thing. I think that could actually be a point of difference. If you had super funds that focused on Australian building, how many of you would put your money in a super fund that said, okay, we are building, we're, investing in potable water for the next 50 years to ensure that security is provided in Australia. We're investing in, Australian farms, buying up Australian businesses so they don't need to be held by offshore parties. How many of you would be interested in that? How many of you would be happy for your super funds to go to that? Maybe Australian super could become nationalistic. Yeah, there's an idea. There's plenty of cash, plenty of willing investors. What we want is a supply of projects, he said. One investment that has evaporated for Australian super is Virgin Airlines. The fund had partnered with private equity firm BGH Partners, a modest investment, according to Mr. Silk, in a bid for Virgin. It didn't make it through to the final round of bidders. Mr. Silk said he didn't know why the bid failed, but he wouldn't be making another tilt for the troubled airline and didn't have plans to invest in airlines in general. Well, there you have it, everyone. An interesting take on the super industry, and expecting returns to be between -1% and 1%. We'll have to see how the market finishes off the financial year. It's so volatile. What can happen in the news, and that can affect returns. The real indicator will be next year. Or, sorry, next financial year, when all of the support mechanisms for the economy disappeared. What do you think, everyone? Let us know in the comments. What's your favorite super fund? Are you a fan of super? How much do you have in there? I'll do a poll, actually, on it, so we'll see. We'll just anonymously, people can see just the spread of how much people have in there. Are you depending it on your retirement, or is it going to be a little bonus? Or would you rather invest in other things you have more direct control in? Or are you in a fund that gives you just enough level of control? Or do you not even know anything about it, and this is the first time you're starting to actually think about it as your money? As always, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If you'd like to support the content I create here, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay, or Independent Reserve and Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays. You can use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.